We're almost ready to build the calculator. We need to start setting some JavaScript. First thing I want to do is I usually like to grab the elements into an object format so that we can make use of it as needed within our code. So this is our main calculator, and using document query selector, I'm going to select the element with the class of my cal, and that's going to bring that element into a usable object format. And then it's always a good idea to just do a quick check to make sure that you do have the element that you want to make use of and utilize. So the other thing that we need to do, we need to set some variables. And these are consts, they're not going to be changing. So this is the key layout. We can call it my keys. This is an array, but it's going to have arrays within it as well. So for each row of keys, so the first row is going to contain keys of 1, 2, 3, and the next row. So don't forget to comma separate these arrays out. So the next one is, actually this is going to be a plus sign. This is not a 4. This is a plus sign. So this is 4, 5, 6 on the keypad of the calculator, and then the next one can be a minus sign. And this essentially is how your keys are going to be laid out. You might want a different combination, but I think this one is going to be a fairly standard one that gets used. This can be for multiplication, so the asterisk for multiplication. And then let's finalize this with the last row. So we've got a C for clear, we've got a 0 for a 0, we've got an equal sign for equal, and there's one that we're still missing. So we're missing the backslash, which is the divide. Builds out all of our available keys that we need. And we also have a series of operators that we want to use. So we can call them my operators or operators, whatever you want to call them. And then this is where we've got the actual operators that we are going to be using within the functionality, and that's up and coming as we build this application out. So make sure that they correspond with the keys, and we can save that. So let's refresh, make sure there's no errors, and we're ready to build our application. So what I usually like to do is make sure that the DOM is loaded, so the elements are loaded. And this is the same thing that's used when you use jQuery, if you're familiar with jQuery, where we've got our document ready. So we're adding an event listener to the document object, and the event that we're listening for is DOM content loaded. I know it's fairly long, but this is the object that gets loaded when all of the DOM content is loaded. So basically at this point, you're ready to start interacting with the DOM. It's always a good idea to include it just to make sure that everything is loaded properly. So once this loads, you're ready to start building out your calculator. And we're going to start out by setting up, creating a div. So this one is going to be the output area. And if we want to have it as a global object, we can set a variable that's going to be just globally sitting as my output. And then within our function, we set up that output and using doc create element. So this gives us the ability to create elements dynamically in JavaScript. And I'll console log out the value of my output so that we can see that we are creating an element. So we see that element is being created in the console. And right now we don't see a whole lot. It's just a div that's been created. So we need to add some properties to it. And we want to start this my output and set its inner HTML and give it inner HTML of 0. So calculators usually have a digit, and that's going to be 0. We can also take that my output object that we created, and we can add a class to it. So using the class list method, we've got a few choices. We can add, remove, toggle. So in this case, we want to add in a class, and that class that we want to add in is output. So let's refresh, take another look at it. And so now we've got a div with a class of output and inner HTML of nothing. So next we need to append it to our calculator object. So that's where we can take the my calculator object, and using the append child method in JavaScript gives us the ability to add elements to other elements. So the element that we want to add is the my output object. So let's see what that looks like. And there we go. So now we've got our screen for our calculator. So it's starting to look a little bit better. And of course, coming up next, we've got to loop through the keys and add in all of the keys. So we have something that actually looks like a calculator. So far, so good. We've got a screen. Go ahead and add this into your project. And as you can see, if you wanted to apply the styling now, you can actually visually see the screen. So you can adjust some of the output styling that we created by default in the beginning. or you're okay to go with what you currently have as well and then update the styling afterwards. So however you will prefer to approach this, either way, we've just got our screen, and coming up next, we're going to add in the buttons. So go ahead and create an element dynamically. So create a div, update some content inside the div, and then add a class to that div, and then lastly, append it to your main calculator object. And coming up next, we're going to build the keys.